One other thing
as far as the attendance is that I didn't bring any pizza, so. Thank you for coming to this presentation, and a few things is that just start out with a few things about myself is that I am an associate professor of theology and religious studies at St. Martin's University in Washington State, Lacey near Olympia, and that is ancestral land of the Nisqually and Squaxin. And I'm also a Benedictine monk at the monastery, and I studied for my PhD at Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. I completed my dissertation in 2016. That's the ancestral land of Olone. This spring semester, I'm a visiting scholar at Fordham University, ancestral land of Lenape. And my presentation is on printmaking and book illustration as a marginal art. A little bit of a play on words, for those that don't have English as your first language, is that margins is in one sense something that is to the side, kind of, and also the margins of the page. So a little bit of a play on words there. So here in New York City, if you would talk about art, a lot of people think about the Met, MoMA, Whitney, Guggenheim, these art museums. But if you go to these art museums, you'll see mostly paintings and sculptures. So you don't see as many prints, and you might not really see book illustrations. So in that sense, printmaking and book illustration I see as kind of on the margins of art, not really in the mainstream, so to speak. Maybe there is some snobbishness in the art world that marginalizes illustration or book illustration, but I think it also comes with the territory. Illustrations for books, they're not originally intended to be shown on gallery or museum walls. They're meant to be seen within the actual pages of books. They're meant to be seen by someone who is reading the book. And also in the times that I've presented on printmaking, I've also realized they're not necessarily meant to be shown on a screen because there's some distance, and when you're looking at a book, you can really hold the book close to your eyes and see. So sometimes they're not so clear when seen on a screen like this. In this case, I'm actually pretty impressed with how that looks. I think that's also brighter than what would happen if it's projected onto a screen as well. So that is kind of nice. Okay. So I came to, just one little pause. Okay, some sound effects. So I came to the study of this kind of art, printmaking and book illustration, through writing my dissertation on Fritz Eichenberg, 1901 to 1990. I wrote my dissertation on Fritz Eichenberg. Eichenberg is somewhat known as a religious artist. He produced some very well-known religious images for the Catholic Worker newspaper, the Voice of the Catholic Worker movement, founded by Dorothy Day and Peter Morin in 1933, here in New York, in the East Village. Despite the renown Eichenberg has achieved through his art for the Catholic Worker, these images that he produced for the Catholic Worker represent a small fraction of his total work. Most of his work was for book illustrations of works of literature. So here are some of the authors of novels that Eichenberg illustrated. So Shakespeare, Turgenev, Pushkin, Bronte, both Bronte sisters, Edgar Allan Poe, Dostoevsky, Erasmus, Tolstoy, Dylan Thomas. And so one thing that you can also see here is that he also had a propensity for illustrating Russian authors as well. So this year I've been on a sabbatical from my university in order to have time to work on revising my dissertation into a book. In this process, I'm learning as much as I can about his illustrations for books. I really did not focus on that in my dissertation, so now I'm really getting into the illustrations he made for books and working on putting him in context with other similar artists. Okay, so Eichenberg actually began his career. He was born in Germany and began his career in Germany, in Berlin. He studied art in Leipzig. He was born in Cologne in 1900, and then he began his career in the 1920s in Berlin. And he began his career as sort of an illustrator for journals. This is so an illustrator for Ullstein publications in Berlin. This is one of example that shows husband and wife. It's called Der Abgrund, the Abyss. So just kind of shows a married couple with that kind of chasm of communication in between. And so he's from a Jewish family, and that gives some explanation for coming to the United States from Germany with his wife and daughter in 1933 into America during the time of the Depression. And so here are some of the other kinds of printmakers in New York City that could be somewhat similar to Fritz Eichenberg. Hugo Gellert, Gottlieb, Gropper, Lozowick, Mabel Dwight, Elizabeth Olds, Nam Murray. Fritz Eichenberg actually does not fit in very easily with these printmakers. He was not really very political in his art, or not very overtly political. In the 1930s, soon he started to do some work for a federal arts project, which was basically government funded, part of Works Progress Administration, part of the New Deal of President Roosevelt, that paid funding for artists to help make ends meet during the Depression. So here is one example of a work that Eichenberg did for a federal arts project called City Lights. And so it kind of gives some impression. He's not really he's not political in his art, although he sometimes kind of pokes fun at humanity and is kind of attracted to the wayward side of humanity, so to speak. I think this is, I'm pretty sure that this is a picture of New York City. Maybe not any particular scene. You might say this could be a scene of Times Square, possibly. And here are some details of that as well. And another kind of a New York scene is his image of the subway. So from 1930s. The other thing that puts him somewhat different from the other artists that I showed is that he really gravitated towards book illustration. He wasn't really one. Some of the other artists didn't really illustrate books. They just made their prints and sold their prints as artwork without including them in book illustration. Whereas Fritz Eichenberg really focused on book illustration. One of the first that he illustrated was Puss in Boots. So he also did a lot of children's illustration as well. This actually was somewhat successful. It was named one of the best 50 books of the year for his work on this. Another key figure for Fritz Eichenberg that I really started to try to learn about more because of his influence on Fritz Eichenberg as a book illustrator is George Macy. He's actually a graduate of Columbia University School of Journalism, and then he founded book publishing companies with the idea that he would try to get great and sometimes famous artists to illustrate literature. He was planning for this in 1929, and the idea was that people would subscribe. They would have a yearly subscription to this, and they would produce 10 to 12 books a year, and if you subscribed for the year, you would basically receive these books in the mail. And these were also very high quality books. Here are a few of the books that they published. Gulliver's Travels, that's what I will speak about soon. But in 1929, they produced a Gulliver's Travels illustrated by Alexander King, another illustrator. Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman, Travels of Baron von Munchausen, Robinson Crusoe, and here are a few just other kinds of works of literature that they produced. Also, Alice in Wonderland, one of the classics that really, maybe one of the books that is most often illustrated because of all the visual imagery there. They produced an edition in 1932, which was the 100-year celebration of the birth of the author Lewis Carroll, hosted at Columbia University with his daughter Alice Hargraves, who the book is dedicated to and written for, was in attendance to sign copies of that as well. Eventually, soon after, in the 1930s, George Macy got Pablo Picasso to illustrate classic Greek work, Lysistrata, as well, just to kind of show. Some of the other artists that were illustrating books for limited edition club. Rockwell Kent also was a graduate of the School of Architecture here at Columbia University. And here are some of the other artists who illustrated books for limited editions club. George Macy asked, Eichenberg was eager to see if he could find work with Limited Editions Club, and they agreed for Eichenberg to do illustrations for Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment in 1938. And this ultimately was the first of a long series of books that Eichenberg illustrated for Limited Editions Club. Soon after, Gulliver's Travels, some Shakespeare, Turgenev, Pushkin, more of Dostoevsky, and then later throughout, so over the course of several decades, probably 4 decades, that he would illustrate. Eichenberg also basically began his career teaching at the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. So he was a professor of graphic arts there as well. Okay, so this illustration here that I put into the flyer for this. Here's a close-up to that. And I chose this image for my flyer in large part because it is the cover. It's the image that is on the cover page, inside cover page of this edition of Gulliver's Travels. I'm curious how many people have read Gulliver's Travels? Okay, all right. I actually did not read that when I was growing up, and so I only read it within the last few weeks. First, I listened to it on audio book, and then I just went on to Project Gutenberg and read it. So I guess my impressions of Gulliver's Travels are pretty new, and I think I could spend more time with it to get a better idea of the book. But one impression for me. I also started to watch a movie of Gulliver's Travels, a cartoon that actually came out the same year, 1940, that Eichenberg's book came out. And after a while, I just stopped watching it. It just seemed like very, very, very oriented towards children, and like Laputians are singing songs and they're dancing around. It's like there's not really much happening. Actually, I asked someone else here at iHouse if someone who's Chinese. I thought, I don't know if you would have read this book or if you've heard of it, Gulliver's Travels, and she said no, she'd never heard of it. I said, okay, well, yeah, I didn't think that you would, but it's the story of a man is shipwrecked on an island, and then little people come up, and she said, oh yeah, I read that book. Just because of starting to describe what the book is about. She said, oh yeah, I read that book. And I said, okay. Now another question I have is, since you read that book, did you really think of how much of the book did you kind of find satire, like political satire? And she said, 0. And so I think in some ways, there's a very fantastical element to Gulliver's Travels that makes it kind of seem like, what is this? There's little people, it's a fantasy world, is there anything? And so I think in a lot of ways, Gulliver's Travels can be presented as entertainment. This is kind of a fun story of someone who's shipwrecked and little people come and he gets to know the little people and so forth without really understanding the satire of it as well. And I admit I don't really know if I understand. I don't think that I'm still kind of new to this, but I've definitely seen a lot of scholarship on the context that Jonathan Swift wrote this book in, and what kind of satire it would have been understood as in his time. And definitely a lot of the kinds of illustrations of Gulliver's Travels a lot of the covers of Gulliver's Travels books show Gulliver, the man here, on the beach with little people coming up to him. They tie him down as well because they're afraid, because he's so much bigger than them, they're afraid that he could easily kill them all, so they tie him down. And so a lot of these covers have to do with those kinds of that scene being depicted. Now here is Eichenberg, as I showed before, his cover doesn't show that. His cover is the island floating in the sky. So he's definitely trying to do things different than the norm. And here is his version of the little people coming up to Gulliver, the Lilliputians, from the first island that he comes to. So it gives a little bit of an idea of he's doing things differently, and not directed totally to the children's audience either. Okay, so the full title here is Gulliver's Travel, an account of the 4 voyages into several remote nations of the world. And as I was thinking of what I would present here at iHouse, I thought it would be kind of fun if I could do something with kind of an international theme. Now this is going into fictional places, but in that sense, I thought, well, it does have kind of a international theme. It has a theme of going from the place that you know, that you were born in and raised in, to another strange land, such as America, you could say. But even if it is fictional. And here are the parts to, the 4 parts, A Voyage to Lilliput, and that is, the first one is, this is the one where Gulliver is, it seems, I think in at least 3 of these islands that Gulliver comes to, it's because of a storm at sea. He's going somewhere and the storm puts him off course, and he ends up first in the island of Lilliput, and that's where the little people are. After most of these adventures, after the first, and I think maybe even after each one of them, he goes back to his homeland of England, sometimes for very short amounts of time before he goes out again. He really has this desire to see the world. As I was listening to it on audiobook the first time, I thought, I really didn't know, and then it was interesting to me that it does take place on Earth, and he does talk about being from England. At one point, he is heading to Japan. He talks about sailing around the Cape of Good Hope. At one point, he arrives by ship in Amsterdam. So it's not like a Tolkien Middle Earth that has absolutely no connection to our planet. It takes place on this Earth with these kinds of fictional, and he really kind of tries to kind of blur the boundary, even if it's so absurd that you realize, okay, this is not real, but he is kind of trying to present it. And I also found the book to be quite funny in a lot of ways. Some of the humor can be very crude as well. A lot of humor related to excrement, creatures throwing excrement on him as a way of attacking him. Some strange and kind of funny things that happen throughout. And then the third part, what was that? The third part is the island in the air. And then the fourth part is the voyage to the country of the Houyhnhnms. That's kind of how I'm pronouncing it based on listening to the audiobook. And for this presentation, I think I'll present for maybe 5 or 10 more minutes, and I will focus more on part 4. Part 4 is the part that I found the most interesting, and at least I could see some themes in Gulliver's Travel that to me were kind of common themes to Eichenberg and the other art that I've seen Eichenberg make in his other book illustrations and his work for the Catholic Book. The land of the Houyhnhnms is the place where he encounters the horses, talking horses, educated horses, horses that have civilization and all this. And so first of all is an illustration of him being encountered by horses. And then another scene here is that one of the horses really is interested in having Gulliver describe the country that he's from. And the horse really has a lot of questions as Gulliver is describing England, and this is where the setup is for the author here, Jonathan Swift, to present a satire of England by having Gulliver explain England to the Houyhnhnms, the horse. And also that this is Gulliver's, and it's Jonathan Swift's satire of England, but I think, broadly speaking, his satire of Europe as well, as a whole. And so one of the things that the Houyhnhnm, the horse you could say, does not understand is war. So he keeps just asking, why do you have wars? And so all of this is that Gulliver explains more and more, we have wars and people fight for this reason and fight for that reason, and here are all the weapons that are created. And, so there's some satire in that. And then this also leads to the horse, the Houyhnhnm, asking Gulliver to give further explanation. Now that you explained that, the other thing that the Houyhnhnm doesn't understand is law. Why do you have the laws? And so he goes into all of this. And then finally, he also doesn't understand money. So he really wants him to describe money and all of this, the economy, so to speak. With book illustration, it's interesting the different scenes that the illustrator will select to illustrate. And then this one is about, the bulk of the people are forced to live miserably. Okay, so a lot of this has to do with the class system. Basically, that the poor people are working to create material goods for the wealthy. And now this is the final image in this book, the final image that Eichenberg produced for this. And here, in the end, this is kind of a spoiler, but I feel like if a book is a couple hundred years old, it's okay to give out the spoilers. But really, Gulliver, after being in these different parts of the world, and especially the Houyhnhnms, being there, he really wants to stay and decides that he doesn't want to ever go back to England to Europe, he starts to really appreciate the Huinims because they're asking the questions, why do you have war? Why do you have the laws? Why do you have money? He starts, as he's explaining why they have all these things, he kind of starts to hate humanity and feels like, oh, he doesn't want to go back, not even to his own family. There's some kind of reason why he has to leave, and he thinks to himself, okay, I can't stay here anymore. I'm just going to go back to Europe, and I'm going to find some kind of island somewhere that I can live on by myself and not have to actually go back to civilization. So in the end, this final image is that he beholds his figure in a glass, in a mirror. You can see that the book, in the end, finally he does go back to Europe. He goes back to his family. But it's a very slow process, and people think that ultimately, being away from civilization, he's gone crazy. So I think, oh, okay, well, he's gone crazy. This is why he's acting so weird. Took him a while to allow his wife to sit at the table with him for dinner. So he's having a hard time readjusting back to society. So that's basically my presentation. Thank you all. And yeah, if anyone has any questions,